Every year, nearly 5 million people walk into this canyon, and a lot of them get it completely wrong. They book the wrong hotel, they stand in line for a hike that needs a permit they never applied for. Some even skip the one trail that turns out to be the most unforgettable walk of their entire trip because nobody told them it existed. Zion isn't just another national park, it's a half-mile deep canyon carved by a river that's still cutting through solid rock right now, today, while you watch this. And inside it are trails so narrow you'll walk through a river to hike them, ledges so exposed that only a lottery system decides who gets to stand on top, and a stretch of scenery so remote that most visitors never even know it's part of the same park. So if this is your first time heading to Zion, stick around. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly where to go, where to stay, just as important, exactly what to skip. Zion National Park. Long before it carried an English name, the Southern Paiute people called this place Mukintuyap, a word tied to the idea of a straight canyon carved by water and time. Zion sits in southwestern Utah, where the Colorado Plateau meets the Mojave Desert and the Great Basin, a collision of ecosystems found almost nowhere else in the country. The canyon itself was cut by the Virgin River over roughly 13 million years, slicing nearly half a mile down through Navajo sandstone that once formed a desert of shifting dunes larger than the Sahara. President William Howard Taft first protected the area as a national monument in 1909, and Congress upgraded it to national park status in 1919, making it one of the earliest parks established after the National Park Service itself was created. Mormon settlers who arrived in the 1860s gave it the biblical name Zion, believing they had found a promised refuge among its towering walls. Today, those same walls, some rising over 2,000 feet straight up, draw close to 5 million visitors a year, making Zion one of the most visited parks in the entire system. And every one of them enters through a canyon that scientists still study to understand how rock, water, and time can build something this dramatic.
The Narrows. Some hikes in America ask you to walk on a trail. This one asks you to walk inside a river. The Narrows is the section of Zion Canyon where the Virgin River has squeezed itself between sandstone walls that in places stand only 20 feet apart while climbing 1,000 feet overhead. Hikers wade directly through the water for miles, often up to their knees or waist, with the current pulling gently at their legs and the canyon walls blocking out most of the sky. There is no built trail here because the riverbed is the trail, which makes this one of the only hikes in any national park where the path itself changes with every flood season. Flash floods are a real danger, and rangers post daily conditions because a storm miles away can send a wall of water through the canyon with almost no warning. Most visitors rent water shoes and a walking stick in the nearby town before starting out, a small local tradition that has grown into its own outfitting industry. Reaching the far end, a spot called Wall Street, rewards hikers with the narrowest and tallest section of the entire canyon, a place where sunlight barely touches the water below, and it remains one of the most photographed natural corridors in the country.
Angel's Landing. Few trails in the national park system carry a reputation quite like this one. Angel's Landing climbs nearly 1,500 feet in nightmarish switchbacks known as Walter's Wiggles, named after the park's first superintendent, before narrowing into a rock spine with sheer drop-offs on both sides. Chains bolted into the sandstone give hikers something to hold on to for the final half mile, a feature added in the 1930s by the Civilian Conservation Corps, the same New Deal program that built much of Zion's early infrastructure. A visitor in 1916 reportedly said that only an angel could land on the summit, which is how the formation earned its name. The view from the top looks straight down into Zion Canyon, with the Virgin River appearing as a thin ribbon far below and the Great White Throne rising directly across the gap. Because the trail has caused a number of fatal falls over the decades, the park introduced a strict permit lottery system in 2022, limiting how many people can attempt it each day. That change transformed Angel's Landing from a first-come hike into one of the most sought-after permits in the entire park system, and standing on that narrow summit remains, for many visitors, the single most vivid memory of their time in Utah. Emerald Pools Trail. Not every trail in Zion demands nerve, and this one proves it. The Emerald Pools Trail offers a gentler introduction to the canyon, leading hikers past a series of pools fed by waterfalls that trickle, and sometimes pour, down sandstone cliffs stained green and orange by mineral deposits and algae. The lower, middle, and upper pools sit at increasing elevations, so families and casual walkers often stop at the lower pool, while more ambitious hikers continue up. Behind the lower pool, the trail passes beneath a rock overhang where water drips down like a natural curtain, a favorite spot for photographs and one of the coolest, shadiest points in the entire canyon during Utah's hot summer months. The pools themselves are fed largely by seasonal runoff, which means their appearance can shift dramatically between a wet spring and a dry autumn. Desert bighorn sheep, reintroduced to Zion in the 1970s after disappearing from the region, are sometimes spotted on the cliffs above this trail, moving across ledges that look far too narrow to hold them. For visitors who want to experience the canyon's quieter, greener side without technical exposure, this trail has become one of the park's most dependable introductions to what makes Zion's ecosystem so unusual.
Zion Canyon Scenic Drive. For most of the year, private vehicles are not allowed on this road, and that restriction is exactly what makes it work. The Zion Canyon Scenic Drive stretches about 6 miles along the canyon floor, and since the year 2000, it has been served primarily by a free shuttle system designed to protect the fragile canyon environment from traffic congestion that once choked the park every summer. The road threads beneath towering formations like the Court of the Patriarchs, 3 sandstone peaks named after Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob by a Methodist minister in 1916, and the Great White Throne, a solid block of Navajo sandstone that rises nearly 2,000 feet from the canyon floor. Mule deer graze along the roadside in the early morning, often close enough to view from the shuttle window, while California condors, one of the rarest birds in North America, occasionally circle high above the cliffs. The drive ends near the Temple of Sinawava, a natural amphitheater carved by the river and the starting point for the trail into the Narrows. Because the shuttle stops at nearly every major trailhead, this single road functions as the spine of the entire park, connecting nearly every major experience Zion has to offer.
Kolob Canyons. Most visitors never see this part of Zion, and that alone makes it worth mentioning. Kolob Canyon sits in the park's remote northwest corner, accessed through a separate entrance off Interstate 15, roughly 40 miles from the main canyon most tourists know. The name Kolob comes from Mormon scripture, referring to a star described as being near the throne of God, a fitting name for cliffs that glow deep red and orange in late afternoon light. A 5-mile scenic drive winds through narrow finger canyons carved into the Colorado Plateau, offering views that feel closer to Bryce Canyon's color palette than to Zion's main corridor. The Kolob Arch, reachable only by a serious backcountry hike, ranks among the largest natural stone arches on Earth, with a span exceeding 200 feet, though its exact measurement has shifted slightly depending on the survey method used over the years. Because this section receives a small fraction of the crowds that fill Zion Canyon, it has quietly become the choice for visitors seeking solitude without leaving the park's boundaries. For anyone willing to make the detour, Kolob Canyons offers proof that even a heavily visited park can still hide a section that feels almost undiscovered. Springdale, Utah. Just outside the park's south entrance sits a town that exists almost entirely because of the canyon beside it. Springdale is home to fewer than 600 permanent residents, yet it hosts millions of travelers passing through each year on their way into Zion. The town's layout puts it within easy walking distance of the park entrance, and its free shuttle connects directly to the park's own shuttle system, allowing many visitors to leave their cars parked for their entire stay. Restaurants, small inns, and outfitters line the main road, many of them family-owned for generations, giving Springdale a character closer to a mountain town than a typical tourist strip. The red cliffs that surround Zion Canyon rise directly behind the town's buildings, meaning visitors often wake up to the same sandstone walls they will be hiking beneath hours later. Because Zion has no large hotels inside the park itself, Springdale has become the practical base camp for the overwhelming majority of visitors, a small community that has learned to balance small-town life with the pressure of hosting one of the most popular parks in the country.
Zion Lodge. Deep inside the canyon, at the base of some of its tallest cliffs, sits the only lodging built directly within Zion's boundaries. Zion Lodge was originally constructed in 1925 by the Union Pacific Railroad, designed by architect Gilbert Stanley Underwood, the same designer behind lodges at Bryce Canyon and the Grand Canyon's North Rim. A fire destroyed much of the original building in 1966, and the current structure was rebuilt to preserve the same rustic style using the original foundation and layout. Staying here means waking up inside the canyon itself, with the Great White Throne and Emerald Pools trailhead just steps from the front door, something no hotel in Springdale can offer. Because it sits directly on the shuttle route, guests can reach nearly any major trail within minutes without needing a car at all. Rooms book out months in advance, particularly during spring and fall when temperatures are mildest and the canyon's cottonwood trees turn a deep gold. For travelers who want to feel the canyon's quiet at sunrise before the first shuttle of the day even arrives, Zion Lodge remains the only way to genuinely sleep inside one of America's most dramatic landscapes.
The subway. Some of Zion's most striking scenery is intentionally kept difficult to reach. The subway is a slot canyon carved into Left Fork Creek, named for its smooth, tube-like walls that curve overhead in a shape resembling an underground tunnel. Reaching it requires a permit, obtained through a lottery system the park uses specifically to limit foot traffic in this fragile, slow-eroding formation. Hikers can approach from the bottom as a strenuous day hike, or from the top as a technical canyoneering route involving rappels through cold, deep pools, a route that demands rope skills and proper equipment. The canyon's smooth curves formed over thousands of years as floodwaters scoured the sandstone in a spiral pattern, a process geologists still use as a textbook example of slot canyon erosion. Photographers often visit in early afternoon, when indirect sunlight filters down and reflects off the pooled water, casting the walls in a soft blue and gold glow that rarely appears in ordinary daylight. Because access is deliberately restricted, the subway remains one of the few places in Zion where a visitor can stand in a landscape shaped almost entirely by water with barely another hiker in sight.
Weeping Rock. A short walk in Zion can sometimes lead to one of its strangest natural features. Weeping Rock is a sandstone alcove where water seeps continuously from the cliff face, not from a spring or stream above, but from rainfall and snowmelt that fell on the plateau up to 1,200 years earlier. That water travels slowly downward through porous Navajo sandstone until it hits a layer of denser rock it cannot pass, forcing it to emerge sideways along the cliff and drip down in a constant, gentle curtain. Hanging gardens of ferns, wildflowers, and moss cling to the alcove walls, sustained entirely by this slow seep in an otherwise dry desert environment, creating a pocket of green that looks almost out of place against the surrounding red rock. The trail leading to it was closed for several years after a rockfall in 2019 damaged the path, and its careful reconstruction reflects how seriously the park treats visitor safety in areas prone to falling debris. Native tribes in the region considered natural springs and seeps like this one to be significant, often tied to stories about water and survival in the desert. Standing beneath the dripping alcove, visitors are witnessing rainfall that fell over 1,000 years ago, finally completing its journey through solid rock, a small but striking reminder of just how slowly this landscape truly moves.
The Zion Mount Carmel Highway and Tunnel. Before this road existed, reaching the eastern side of Zion required a journey of several days around the plateau. Completed in 1930, the Zion Mount Carmel Highway was considered an extraordinary feat of engineering for its time, culminating in a mile-long tunnel blasted directly through solid sandstone, with large windows cut into the rock to let light and air into the passage. At the time of its completion, it was the longest tunnel of its kind in the United States, and it remains too narrow for two large vehicles, including most RVs and buses, to pass through safely at the same time, which is why the park still uses a traffic control system today to send oversized vehicles through one direction at a time. East of the tunnel, the road winds through a completely different landscape than the main canyon, past slick rock domes and checkerboard-patterned sandstone formed by ancient crisscrossing sand dunes hardening into stone. This section of the park sees a fraction of the visitors that crowd the main canyon shuttle route, offering wide desert views instead of narrow walls. Engineers in the 1920s had no modern tunneling equipment, relying instead on dynamite and hand labor to cut through nearly a mile of solid rock. Even now, driving through that tunnel feels like passing through a threshold between two entirely different versions of Zion, one carved by a river, the other shaped by wind and ancient sand.